Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you might change everything you believe about yourself. Right now, in this very moment, you might be carrying a story that you've told yourself so many times it feels like truth. That story says you're broken. That story whispers you're fundamentally flawed, that something essential within you is damaged beyond repair, that you're simply not capable of being the person you want to be. But here's what I need you to understand with every fiber of your being. You are not broken. You are exhausted. And there is a world of difference between these two states. Exhaustion masquerades as brokenness with remarkable precision. When you're running on empty, when your nervous system has been in overdrive for months or years, when you've been pushing through pain and pretending you're fine, your mind begins to interpret your limitations as permanent defects. You forget what it feels like to have energy. You forget what it's like to wake up excited about the day. You forget that there was a time when challenges felt manageable and problems felt solvable. In the fog of depletion, you start to believe that this depleted version of yourself is who you really are. But it's not. This exhausted version of you is not your true self any more than a wilted plant represents the full potential of its species. A plant that hasn't received water doesn't conclude it's broken. It simply needs what it needs. And so do you. You need rest. You need restoration. You need to stop pathologizing your humanity and start recognizing that you are a living being with actual limits, actual needs, actual requirements for thriving. The culture you live in has convinced you that needing rest is weakness, that requiring recovery is failure, that having boundaries around your energy is selfishness. These are lies designed to extract maximum productivity from you while giving you minimum support. Think about how you've been living. Really think about it. How many hours of genuine, restorative rest have you gotten in the past week? Not just sleep, though that matters too, but actual rest where you weren't consuming content, weren't solving problems, weren't planning the next thing or analyzing the last thing. How many moments have you given yourself where you could simply exist without performing, producing, or proving anything? If you're honest, the answer is probably very few. You've been running a marathon at sprint pace and then wondering why you can't go faster. Your body is speaking to you constantly, sending you signals that it needs care. But you've learned to override those signals. You've learned to silence the fatigue with caffeine, to push through the pain with willpower, to ignore the anxiety with distraction. You've become so skilled at disconnecting from your own needs that you genuinely believe you don't have any. Or worse, you believe that having needs makes you weak. So you keep pushing. And your body keeps trying to get your attention. The headaches, the tension in your shoulders, the knot in your stomach, the racing heart, the insomnia, these aren't signs that you're broken. These are signs that you're human and that your human body has been running in crisis mode for far too long. When you're exhausted, everything becomes harder. Tasks that used to be simple feel overwhelming. Decisions that used to be easy feel impossible. Interactions that used to be energizing feel draining. And instead of recognizing this as the natural consequence of depletion, you interpret it as evidence of your inadequacy. You think there's something wrong with you because you can't do what you used to do, forgetting that you used to have energy that you no longer have. You're trying to run software that requires significant resources on a system that's operating at 5% battery, and then blaming yourself when it doesn't work smoothly. The story of brokenness is particularly insidious because it feels like clarity. When you're struggling and you can't figure out why, labeling yourself as broken provides an explanation. It gives you a framework for understanding your experience. The problem is that it's the wrong framework. It's a framework that leads to shame instead of healing, to self-judgment instead of self-compassion, to giving up instead of building back up. When you believe you're broken, you believe you're beyond help. When you understand you're exhausted, you recognize that you need support, rest, and time. Let me tell you something about the human nervous system. It wasn't designed for the world you're living in. Your stress response system evolved to help you survive acute physical threats like predators or natural disasters. It's brilliant at short-term crisis management. What it's not designed for is chronic, ongoing stress with no resolution. When you're constantly worried about money, relationships, health, work, the state of the world, your nervous system stays activated. It keeps you in a state of hypervigilance, always scanning for threats, always preparing for danger. This state is metabolically expensive. It burns through your resources at an unsustainable rate. And when you stay in this state for months or years, you don't just get tired. You get depleted at a cellular level. Your adrenal glands become fatigued from constantly producing stress hormones. Your digestion suffers because your body diverts resources away from rest and digest functions. Your immune system becomes compromised because your body is prioritizing immediate survival over long-term maintenance. Your sleep becomes disrupted because your system can't downregulate enough to enter deep rest. Your mood becomes unstable because your neurotransmitters are out of balance. And through all of this, you think the problem is you. You think you're not meditating enough, not exercising enough, not thinking positively enough. You blame yourself for your body's completely logical response to an overwhelming situation. Here's what you need to understand. Your symptoms are not character flaws. Your exhaustion is not laziness. Your inability to keep up the pace you used to maintain is not weakness. Your need for rest is not selfishness. Your struggle to do things that used to be easy is not failure. These are all signs that your system is depleted and desperately needs restoration. When you reframe your experience from brokenness to exhaustion, everything changes. Instead of asking what's wrong with me, you start asking what do I need? Instead of pushing harder, you start resting deeper. Instead of comparing yourself to who you used to be, you start meeting yourself where you actually are. The journey from exhaustion back to wholeness is not about fixing yourself. It's about nourishing yourself. It's about gradually, consistently, patiently giving your system what it needs to restore its natural resilience. This isn't a quick process. You didn't get this depleted overnight, and you won't recover overnight either. But recovery is absolutely possible when you stop treating yourself like a problem to be solved and start treating yourself like a living being that needs care. Rest is the foundation of everything else. Real rest. Not just the absence of work, but the presence of restoration. This means sleep, yes, but it also means downtime where you're not consuming information or being stimulated. It means time in nature. It means moments of doing nothing. It means activities that genuinely relax you rather than activities you think should relax you. It means giving yourself permission to be unproductive without guilt. Rest is not earned through productivity. Rest is a basic biological need, like food and water. You don't have to deserve it. You simply need it. Nourishment matters more than you might realize. When you're exhausted, proper nutrition often falls by the wayside. You grab whatever's convenient, skip meals because you're too busy, rely on sugar and caffeine to keep you going. But your body needs actual fuel to function, especially when it's trying to recover. This doesn't mean you need a perfect diet. It means you need regular meals with actual nutrients. It means staying hydrated. It means noticing how different foods make you feel and choosing more of the ones that actually nourish you rather than just fill you up or give you a temporary energy spike. Movement helps, but not the punishing kind. When you're depleted, intense exercise can actually make things worse because it's another stressor on an already overwhelmed system. What helps is gentle, regular movement, walking, stretching, yoga, dancing in your living room. Movement that feels good in your body, that helps release tension, that reconnects you with the physical experience of being alive. Movement not as punishment for your body's appearance or performance, but as a celebration of what your body can do and a way to support its natural processes. Connection is essential. Exhaustion thrives in isolation. When you're depleted, You often withdraw from others because you don't have energy for social interaction. But humans are deeply social creatures, and meaningful connection is actually restorative rather than draining. This doesn't mean forcing yourself to attend events you dread or maintaining relationships that exhaust you. It means cultivating connections where you can be authentic, where you feel seen and accepted, where you can both give and receive support. Even brief moments of genuine connection can help remind you that you're not alone in your struggle. Boundaries become crucial when you're recovering from exhaustion. You got depleted in part because you said yes when you meant no, because you gave when you had nothing left to give, because you prioritized everyone else's needs above your own. Learning to set boundaries isn't about becoming selfish. It's about becoming sustainable. It's about protecting your energy so you have something to give. It's about recognizing that you cannot pour from an empty cup, and that constantly running on empty helps no one, least of all you. Your mind needs rest as much as your body. The constant mental chatter, the planning and worrying and analyzing, burns energy. Practices that quiet the mind, even briefly, create space for restoration. This might be meditation, but it doesn't have to be. It might be time in nature where you're present with your senses rather than lost in thought. It might be creative expression where you're absorbed in the process. It might be activities that put you in a flow state where the endless mental commentary quiets down. The goal isn't to stop thinking entirely. It's to give your mind regular breaks from its exhausting habit of constantly processing everything. Emotional processing is part of the work too. When you're running on empty, you often suppress your emotions because you don't have the capacity to deal with them. But unfelt emotions don't disappear. They get stored in your body, creating tension and using up energy. Part of recovering from exhaustion is allowing yourself to actually feel what you're feeling, to cry when you need to cry, to express anger in healthy ways, to acknowledge sadness without trying to immediately fix it, to let yourself feel joy without guilt. Emotions aren't problems to be solved. They're information and energy that needs to move through you. You might notice resistance to all of this. Part of you might be thinking that you don't have time to rest, that you can't afford to slow down, that people depend on you, that taking care of yourself is indulgent. These thoughts are symptoms of the same system that got you depleted in the first place. They're not truth, they're programming, and you can choose to question that programming. What actually happens if you rest? What actually happens if you say no? What actually happens if you prioritize your well-being? Often, the catastrophe you imagine doesn't materialize. And even if some things don't get done, or some people are disappointed, you have to weigh that against the very real consequence of continuing to run yourself into the ground. The truth is that you're more useful, more present, more capable when you're rested than when you're depleted. You make better decisions. You're more creative. You're more patient. You're more resilient. You can actually show up for the people and things that matter to you instead of just going through the motions while running on fumes. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary, and it's not something you do after you've taken care of everything and everyone else. It's the foundation that makes everything else possible. As you begin to rest and restore, you might experience what seems like a paradox. Sometimes when you finally slow down, you feel worse before you feel better. This is because you've been running on adrenaline and willpower, and when you finally stop, your body starts processing all the stress it's been suppressing. You might feel more tired. You might feel more emotional. You might notice physical symptoms you've been ignoring. This isn't a sign that something's wrong. It's a sign that your body finally feels safe enough to start healing. Don't let this temporary intensification convince you that rest doesn't work. Stay with it. Trust the process. Recovery isn't linear. There will be days when you feel significantly better, and then days when you slide back. This is normal. Healing happens in waves, not straight lines. The key is the overall trajectory. Are you gradually having more good days than bad ones? Are you slowly regaining capacity? Are you starting to remember what it feels like to have energy? These are the markers of progress, not whether every single day is better than the last. You might also need to grieve. Grieve the time you lost to exhaustion. Grieve the experiences you missed because you didn't have the energy. Grieve the version of yourself who could do more, be more, handle more. This grief is valid, and processing it is part of healing. You can acknowledge what you've lost while also recognizing that you did the best you could with the resources you had. You survived. That matters. You're still here. That matters. And now you have the opportunity to build a different relationship with yourself and your energy. Part of this rebuilding involves examining the beliefs that led to your depletion. What did you believe about rest? What did you believe about your worth? What did you believe about what you owed other people? Many people develop the unconscious belief that their value comes from what they produce or how useful they are to others. This belief makes rest feel dangerous because it threatens your sense of worth. But your worth isn't conditional. You have inherent value simply because you exist. You don't have to earn the right to take up space, to have needs, to be imperfect to rest. You might also carry beliefs about strength that equate it with never needing help, never showing vulnerability, always being able to handle everything on your own. But real strength includes knowing your limits. Real strength includes asking for help. Real strength includes admitting when you're struggling. The facade of having it all together while you're falling apart internally isn't strength. It's just exhausting. True resilience comes from flexibility, not rigidity, from self-awareness, not denial, from self-compassion, not self-criticism. As you recover, you'll need to redefine success. In a depleted state, you might measure success by how much you accomplish, how busy you are, how much you can handle. But in a restored state, success looks different. It's waking up with energy. It's being present with the people you love. It's feeling connected to yourself. It's having the capacity to enjoy your life, not just survive it. It's being able to respond to challenges from a place of groundedness rather than reactivity. It's having enough in your tank that you can be generous without depleting yourself. You'll also need to get comfortable with doing less. This might be temporary as you recover, or it might be a permanent recalibration of what's sustainable for you. Either way, it requires letting go of the idea that more is always better. Sometimes less is exactly what's needed. Fewer commitments, fewer distractions, fewer shoulds, more space, more ease. More alignment with what actually matters to you rather than what you think should matter. This process of recovery will probably require you to disappoint some people. There will be those who benefited from your depletion, who liked having access to your time and energy whenever they wanted it. When you start setting boundaries and prioritizing your well-being, they might not like it. They might call you selfish. They might withdraw their approval. This is hard. But their comfort cannot come at the cost of your well-being. The relationships that survive your healing are the ones worth keeping, the ones that can only exist when your depleted need to end. You might also face practical barriers to rest. Maybe you're in a situation where you genuinely can't reduce your workload, where you have financial obligations that require you to keep pushing. If this is true, then the work becomes finding rest within the constraints you have. Micro moments of restoration throughout the day, fiercely protecting your sleep. Saying no to optional things that drain you. Being more strategic about where you spend your limited energy. It's not ideal. It's not fair that rest is often a privilege. But even within limitations, there are usually small ways to create more space for restoration. Remember that healing from exhaustion isn't about returning to exactly who you were before. You're not trying to get back to a version of yourself who could run on empty indefinitely. You're becoming someone wiser, someone who knows their limits, someone who values their well-being, someone who understands that they're a human being with actual needs. This new version of you might do less but be more present, might have smaller capacity but better boundaries, might be less impressive to others but more at peace with yourself. And that's not a downgrade. That's growth. There's a certain grief in accepting that you can't do everything, be everything, handle everything. We live in a culture that tells us we should be able to optimize our way to infinite capacity. That with the right productivity system, or morning routine or mindset, we can transcend our human limitations. But you can't, and you don't need to. You're enough as you are, limits and all. The goal isn't to become superhuman, it's to become sustainably human. As you rest and restore, you might start to notice things you were too exhausted to notice before. The beauty in small moments, the pleasure of simple activities, the richness of just being rather than always doing. Exhaustion numbs you to life. It makes everything feel flat and grey. Recovery brings back colour. It brings back sensation. It brings back the capacity for joy, for wonder, for connection, for meaning. These things were always there, but you couldn't access them when you were running on empty. You might also start to notice your intuition coming back online. When you're depleted, you can't hear your inner wisdom because the voice of exhaustion is too loud. As you restore, you start to reconnect with what you actually want, what actually feels right for you, what actually aligns with your values. This might lead to significant changes in your life. You might realize that the path you've been on isn't actually the one you want to be on, that the goals you've been pursuing aren't actually your goals, that the life you've been building isn't actually the one you want to live. This can be disorienting, but it's also liberating. It means you're waking up. The process of recovery teaches you things that you couldn't learn any other way. It teaches you the difference between urgent and important. It teaches you that doing less can lead to better outcomes than doing more. It teaches you that your worth isn't dependent on your productivity. It teaches you what really matters and what's just noise. It teaches you who genuinely cares about you versus who just values what you can do for them. It teaches you that vulnerability is actually a form of courage. It teaches you that rest is productive, even though it doesn't produce anything tangible. You learn to listen to your body in new ways, to recognize the early signs that you're getting depleted before you crash completely, to honor the signals that tell you to slow down, to rest, to adjust course. Your body is constantly giving you feedback, and learning to receive that feedback with curiosity rather than judgment is a skill that serves you for life. Instead of viewing fatigue as an enemy to be conquered, you start viewing it as information to be respected. You also learn to be more honest with yourself and others. Exhaustion often comes from pretending you're fine when you're not, from saying yes when you mean no, from hiding your struggle behind a mask of capability. As you recover, you practice being more authentic, admitting when you're tired, acknowledging when you're overwhelmed, asking for help when you need it, being honest about your limitations. This authenticity is scary at first because you're so used to performing strength, but it's also deeply relieving. The energy you were spending maintaining the facade can now go toward actually taking care of yourself. One of the most important lessons is that self-care isn't selfish. This concept gets thrown around a lot, but when you're exhausted, it's easy to dismiss it as feel-good nonsense that doesn't apply to your situation. But here's the reality. You cannot sustainably give what you don't have. If you're depleted, everything you give comes from deficit, which means you're essentially going into debt. And just like financial debt, this creates a compounding problem. The more depleted you get, the less effective you are, which means you have to work harder to achieve the same results, which depletes you further. The cycle only breaks when you interrupt it by prioritizing restoration. Taking care of yourself makes you more capable of taking care of others and meeting your responsibilities. It's not either. It's both and. You can care about other people and also care about yourself. You can be responsible and also have boundaries. You can be generous and also protect your energy. In fact, you can only sustainably be all those things if you're also taking care of yourself. Otherwise, you burn out, and then you can't show up for anyone, including yourself. As you continue healing, you might find that your relationship with productivity shifts. Instead of measuring your day by how much you accomplished, you might start measuring it by how you felt, by whether you were present, by whether you took care of yourself. Instead of pride coming from how much you can handle, it might come from how well you honored your limits. Instead of pushing through fatigue, you might practice responding to it with rest. These shifts can feel strange at first, especially if you've spent years or decades operating differently, but they become more natural with practice. You might also develop more compassion for others who are struggling. When you've experienced exhaustion masquerading as brokenness, you start to recognize it in other people. You see the person who's irritable and short-tempered not as mean but as depleted. You see the person who's withdrawn and distant not as cold but as overwhelmed. You see the person who's making mistakes not as incompetent but as running on empty. This compassion changes how you interact with people. You become more patient, more understanding, more willing to offer support rather than judgment. This compassion extends to your past self too. As you understand more about how exhaustion works, you can look back at times when you struggled and recognize that you weren't broken then either. You were doing the best you could with the resources and understanding you had. Maybe you made choices you regret. Maybe you hurt people. Maybe you let yourself down. But you were operating from a place of depletion, and that context matters. It doesn't erase the consequences, but it does provide a framework for self-forgiveness and learning rather than shame and self-punishment. The work of recovery also involves learning to receive. Many exhausted people are excellent at giving but terrible at receiving. They'll help anyone who asks, but refuse help when offered. They'll go out of their way for others, but feel guilty accepting support. But receiving is a skill, and it's essential for sustainable well-being. Practice letting people help you. Practice accepting compliments. Practice allowing yourself to be cared for. This might feel uncomfortable or even wrong at first. That discomfort is important information about beliefs you hold about worthiness and reciprocity that might need examining. You'll likely need to get better at saying no. This is hard for many people, especially if you've built your identity around being helpful, being available, being the person who can handle anything. But every yes to something that depletes you is a no to something that could restore you. Every commitment you make from obligation rather than genuine desire is energy you don't have for what actually matters. Learning to say no kindly but firmly is an act of self-respect. It honors both your limits and your priorities. Part of saying no effectively is getting clear on your yes. What actually matters to you? What do you actually want to spend your limited time and energy on? What aligns with your values? What brings you meaning or joy or connection? When you're clear on your yes, it becomes easier to say no to everything else. You're not just declining things randomly. You're protecting space for what matters. This clarity is something that often emerges as you rest and restore, because when you're exhausted, you can't think clearly about what you actually want. You're just trying to survive. As you rebuild your energy, you might be tempted to immediately fill your newly recovered capacity with more commitments, more projects, more obligations. Resist this temptation. Part of healing is learning to live with space, with margin, with breathing room. You need extra capacity for the unexpected, for rest, for spontaneity, for doing nothing. A life that's filled to capacity is a life one small crisis away from overwhelm. Protect your newfound energy by being selective about how you spend it. You'll also need to challenge the glorification of busy. We live in a culture that treats busyness as a status symbol, that equates having a packed schedule with being important or valuable. But busyness is often just poorly managed priorities and inability to say no. It's not something to aspire to. A full calendar doesn't mean a full life. Sometimes the richest life is the one with the most space for spontaneity, for rest, for presence, for simply being rather than constantly doing. Recovery might also involve addressing perfectionism, if that's something you struggle with. Perfectionism and exhaustion often go hand in hand because perfectionism means nothing is ever good enough, which means you're always striving, always pushing, never satisfied. Learning to embrace good enough, to make peace with imperfection, to recognize that done is better than perfect, creates enormous relief. It frees up energy that was being consumed by impossible standards and harsh self-criticism. You might need to examine your relationship with control too. Sometimes exhaustion comes from trying to control everything, from believing that if you just work hard enough, plan well enough, anticipate everything, you can prevent bad things from happening. But this is an exhausting way to live, because you can't actually control most things. Learning to surrender what you can't control, to trust that you can handle what comes even if you can't prevent it, to make peace with uncertainty, this is liberating. It allows you to focus your energy on what you can influence and let go of the rest. As you heal, notice what actually restores you versus what you think should restore you. Sometimes the things we turn to for restoration, like scrolling social media or binge-watching TV, are actually just numbing rather than restoring. They might give you a break from active engagement, but they don't actually replenish your energy. Pay attention to how you feel after different activities. What leaves you feeling more energized? What leaves you feeling more depleted? Everyone's different, so what restores you might be different from what restores someone else. Honor your own needs rather than following prescriptive advice about what self-care should look like. You might also need to address patterns of people-pleasing if this is something that contributes to your depletion. Constantly prioritizing others' feelings, constantly trying to make everyone happy, constantly adjusting yourself to avoid conflict or disapproval. This is exhausting. It means you're always performing, never authentic. It means you're constantly giving energy away to manage others' emotional states. Learning that other people's feelings are their responsibility, not yours, that you can't make everyone happy, and that's okay. That being true to yourself is more important than being liked by everyone. This is freeing. It allows you to reclaim energy you've been spending on an impossible task. The journey from exhaustion to restoration is deeply personal. What you need, how long it takes, what it looks like, all of this is unique to you. Don't compare your process to anyone else's. Don't let anyone tell you should be better by now or that you're doing it wrong. This is your healing, your timeline, your process. Trust it, honor it, be patient with it. Some days will feel like progress. Some days will feel like backsliding. All of it is part of the journey. Remember that setbacks don't erase progress. If you have a period where you slip back into old patterns of overextending yourself, where you get depleted again, this doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. It means you're still learning. Each time you recognize the pattern and make a different choice, you're building new neural pathways, new habits, new ways of being. The learning isn't linear, but it is cumulative. Each time through the cycle, you learn something new. You might also find that as you heal, your relationships shift. Some will deepen as you become more authentic and present. Some will fade as you no longer have the energy to maintain them, or as the dynamic was dependent on you being depleted. Some will be tested by your new boundaries and will either adapt or end. All of this is okay. The relationships that are meant for the healthy, boundaried, authentic version of you will remain and flourish. The ones that required your depletion to survive needed to end anyway. As you restore your energy, you might discover parts of yourself that have been dormant. Creativity that shut down when you were too exhausted to engage with it. Playfulness that disappeared under the weight of constant stress. Curiosity that couldn't surface when you were just trying to survive. Dreams that seemed too frivolous when you could barely manage the basics. As these parts of you reawaken, honor them, make space for them. They're not luxuries to be indulged only after everything else is done. They're essential parts of your humanity that make life worth living. You might also find that your values clarify. When you're depleted, you often just do what's expected, what others want, what seems necessary. But as you recover and reconnect with yourself, you start to get clear on what actually matters to you, what you actually want your life to be about, what you want to stand for, how you want to spend your time, what legacy you want to leave. This clarity is valuable beyond measure because it allows you to make choices that align with who you actually are rather than who you think you should be. The work of healing from exhaustion is also the work of reclaiming your power. When you're depleted, you often feel powerless, like life is happening to you, like you're just reacting to circumstances beyond your control. But as you restore and rebuild, you start to recognize the agency you actually have, the choices available to you, the ways you can shape your experience even when you can't control external circumstances. This doesn't mean you can positive think your way out of genuinely difficult situations. It means recognizing where you do have choice and exercising it intentionally. Part of this is learning to advocate for yourself, to speak up about your needs, to ask for accommodations when necessary, to challenge systems and expectations that demand more than is sustainable. This might mean having difficult conversations with bosses about workload, with partners about division of labor, with family about expectations, with friends about boundaries. These conversations are uncomfortable, but they're necessary. Your needs matter, your well-being matters, and you deserve to have relationships and systems that support your humanity rather than exploit it. As you continue this journey, be gentle with yourself. Change is hard. Unlearning patterns that have been ingrained for years or decades is hard. Going against cultural messages that tell you your worth equals your productivity is hard. Disappointing people who benefited from your depletion is hard. All of this is really hard. And you're doing it anyway. That takes courage. That deserves recognition. Be as kind to yourself as you would be to someone you love who's going through the same thing. Celebrate the small victories. The day you said no without guilt. The evening you rested without feeling like you should be productive. The moment you recognized you were getting depleted and chose to slow down. The time you asked for help and actually accepted it when offered. These might seem small, but they're revolutionary when you're coming from a place of chronic depletion. They're evidence that you're changing, that you're healing, that you're building a different relationship with yourself and your energy. Know that there will be people who don't understand, who think you're being dramatic or weak or selfish, who believe that if they can push through exhaustion, you should be able to as well. You don't need their understanding or approval. You need your own well-being. Their judgment says more about their relationship with their own limits and needs than it does about you. Stay focused on your own healing. Surround yourself with people who support it, and let go of needing everyone to validate your choices. The transformation from believing you're broken to understanding you're exhausted is profound. It shifts you from hopelessness to possibility, from self-judgment to self-compassion, from shame to understanding, from isolation to connection, from depletion to restoration. This shift doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually, in small moments of choosing differently, of responding to yourself with kindness instead of criticism, of honoring your needs instead of overriding them. You are not broken. Read that again. You are not broken. You are a human being who has been operating under impossible conditions, who has been pushed beyond sustainable limits, who has been doing the best you can with the resources you have. Your struggle is not evidence of deficiency. It's evidence that you're human, that you have limits, that you need care. And all of this is completely, utterly, entirely normal. The exhaustion you feel is real. The depletion is real. The overwhelm is real. And so is the possibility of recovery. So is your capacity for resilience. So is the life that's waiting for you on the other side of this restoration process. A life where you're not just surviving but thriving, where you have energy for what matters, where you're present rather than perpetually depleted, where you honor yourself as the finite, precious, worthy being that you are. This journey requires patience. It requires consistency. It requires choosing yourself over and over, even when it's uncomfortable, even when others don't understand, even when the old patterns try to pull you back. But you can do this. You are doing this. Every moment you choose rest over pushing through, every time you set a boundary, every instance of self-compassion, you're healing. You're becoming more yourself. You're building a life that's sustainable rather than one that slowly destroys you. Remember why this matters. Not just because you deserve to feel better, though you do, but because you have a life to live, people to love, experiences to have, meaning to create, purpose to fulfill. And you can't do any of that fully, richly, deeply when you're running on empty. Your restoration isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's the foundation for everything else you want to do and be. So be patient with yourself. Be compassionate with yourself. Be fierce in protecting your energy. Be willing to disappoint people. Be committed to your healing. Be open to support. Be honest about your struggles. Be proud of your progress. Be gentle with your setbacks. Be persistent in your practice. Be willing to change. Be brave in setting boundaries. Be kind in your self-talk. Be realistic about your limits. Be accepting of your humanity. You are not broken, you are exhausted. And exhaustion, unlike brokenness, can be healed. You can rest. You can restore. You can rebuild. You can reclaim your energy, your vitality, your joy. You can create a life that sustains you rather than depletes you. You can become someone who knows their worth isn't conditional, who honors their limits, who takes care of themselves as well as they take care of others. This is possible for you, not someday. Not when you've achieved some impossible standard of perfection. Now, exactly as you are, with all your struggles and limitations and imperfections, you are worthy of rest. You are worthy of care. You are worthy of a life that doesn't require you to constantly sacrifice your well-being. You are worthy of recovery. You are worthy of healing. You are worthy of thriving. Start where you are. Start small if you need to. Start with one moment of rest, one boundary, one instance of choosing yourself, and then another, and another. Build slowly, build steadily. Build a foundation of self-care that can support the life you actually want to live rather than the one you're just surviving. You've been running on empty for so long. It's time to fill your tank. It's time to rest. It's time to restore. It's time to remember that you're not a machine designed for endless productivity. You're a human being with inherent worth and actual needs. Honor that. Protect that. Nurture that. Your life, your well-being, your very existence depends on it. You are not broken. You are exhausted. And understanding this difference changes everything. It opens up the possibility of healing. It removes the shame. It provides a path forward. It allows you to be compassionate with yourself instead of critical. It helps you make different choices. It connects you with your humanity instead of alienating you from it. So rest. Really rest. Deeply rest. Unapologetically rest. Not because you've earned it, but because you need it. Not because you've done enough, but because you're enough. Not because you're finally fixed, but because you were never broken, just exhausted, just depleted, just human. And all of these things are not only okay, they're the truth of who you are. A worthy, valuable, deserving being who needs care, including from yourself. Let's talk more specifically about what restoration actually looks like in practice. Because understanding the concept is one thing, but implementing it in your daily life is another. When you've been running on empty for so long, the very idea of rest can feel foreign, even threatening. You might not even remember what true rest feels like. You might have convinced yourself that you're resting when you're actually just collapsing in front of a screen, numbing yourself rather than genuinely restoring yourself. Real restoration is active, not passive. It's intentional, not accidental. It requires awareness and choice. True rest starts with recognizing that there are different types of rest, and you need all of them. Physical rest is what most people think of when they hear the word rest. This includes sleep, obviously, but also includes things like lying down during the day, taking breaks from physical activity, allowing your body to be still. If you've been pushing your body hard, whether through physical labor, exercise, or just the constant tension of stress, physical rest is essential. Your muscles need time to repair. Your joints need time to recover. Your nervous system needs time to downregulate. But there's also mental rest, which is different from physical rest. Mental rest means giving your brain a break from the constant processing, analyzing, planning, and problem solving it does all day. This might mean time away from screens, from reading, from conversations that require you to think hard. It might mean activities that occupy your hands but quiet your mind, like gentle walking, simple crafts, or being in nature. Your brain, like your body, needs downtime to consolidate memories, process information, and restore its capacity for focus and creativity. Then there's emotional rest, which means time and space to feel and process your emotions rather than constantly managing or suppressing them. This might look like journaling, talking with a trusted friend or therapist, crying when you need to, laughing freely, expressing anger in healthy ways. When you're constantly regulating your emotions to meet external demands, to be professional, to not burden others, to keep it together, you use enormous amounts of energy. Emotional rest means you can let your guard down, be authentic, feel what you're feeling without judgment or urgency to change it. Social rest is another crucial type. This doesn't necessarily mean being alone, though sometimes it does. Social rest means time away from relationships that drain you and time with relationships that energize you. It means interactions where you can be yourself rather than performing, where you can receive as well as give, where you feel accepted rather than evaluated. If you're constantly around people who require emotional labor from you, who criticize or judge you, who demand your attention and energy, you need social rest, even if you enjoy being around people generally. Sensory rest is often overlooked, but increasingly important in our overstimulated world. Bright lights, loud noises, constant notifications, crowded spaces, all of these create sensory input that your nervous system has to process. Sensory rest means dimmer lights, quieter environments, silence or gentle natural sounds, less visual clutter, fewer notifications. When you're overstimulated, everything feels more overwhelming. Creating space for sensory rest helps your nervous system settle and makes everything else more manageable. Creative rest is necessary for anyone who does work that requires imagination, problem solving, or innovation. But it's not just for people in obviously creative fields. Anyone who has to come up with solutions, make decisions, or think outside the box needs creative rest. This comes from experiencing beauty, whether in nature, art, music, or simple everyday moments. It comes from appreciating rather than creating, from consuming rather than producing. When you're constantly in output mode, your creative wells run dry. Creative rest refills them. Spiritual rest, regardless of whether you're religious, means connecting to something larger than yourself, to a sense of meaning and purpose, to the questions of why rather than just what and how. This might come through religious practice, meditation, philosophy, time in nature, service to others, or any activity that connects you to a sense of transcendence or deeper meaning. When life becomes only about tasks and obligations, and getting through the day, you lose touch with what makes it all worthwhile. Spiritual rest reconnects you to purpose. Understanding these different types of rest helps you diagnose what you actually need rather than just generally feeling depleted. Are you physically exhausted, mentally foggy, emotionally overwhelmed, socially drained, overstimulated, creatively dry, spiritually disconnected? Different types of depletion require different types of rest. When you can identify what kind of rest you need, you can be more targeted and effective in how you restore yourself. The challenge is that when you're exhausted, everything feels hard, including rest. You might be too tired to sleep well, too mentally depleted to enjoy activities that usually restore you, too overwhelmed to figure out what you need. This is where you have to start very small. Not with grand plans for self-care or major life changes, but with tiny, manageable steps. 5 minutes of sitting quietly, a short walk outside, one meal where you actually taste your food instead of eating mindlessly, going to bed 30 minutes earlier, saying no to one thing. These small steps matter more than you might think. They matter because they're the beginning of a different relationship with yourself. Each small choice to honor your needs, to be kind to yourself, to prioritize your well-being, creates a tiny shift in your nervous system. It sends a message that you're safe, that you're allowed to have needs, that you matter. Over time, these tiny shifts accumulate. They create new neural pathways. They build new habits. They change your baseline from constantly stressed to more generally okay. But you have to be consistent. One good night of sleep after months of deprivation won't fix everything. One boundary after years of people-pleasing won't transform your relationships overnight. One day of rest after prolonged exhaustion won't fully restore you. Recovery requires sustained commitment to taking care of yourself especially when, it feels uncomfortable or inconvenient or like you're letting people down. It requires choosing yourself over and over until it becomes automatic rather than agonizing. It also requires dealing with the guilt that often comes up when you start prioritizing yourself. You've probably been taught, implicitly or explicitly, that putting yourself first is selfish, that your needs matter less than others' needs, that taking care of yourself is something you do only after everything and everyone else is taken care of, which means effectively never. This programming runs deep. When you start to challenge it, you'll likely feel guilty, anxious, selfish, wrong. These feelings don't mean you're doing something wrong. They mean you're doing something different, something that challenges old patterns, and your system is responding to that change. Sit with the discomfort, notice it, name it, and then choose yourself anyway. The discomfort will lessen over time as new patterns become established. The people who truly care about you will adjust to your boundaries. The relationships that can't survive you taking care of yourself weren't sustainable anyway. The obligations that can't accommodate your humanity weren't reasonable to begin with. You'll start to see that the catastrophe you feared, the rejection and abandonment and failure you worried would come from prioritizing yourself. Either doesn't happen or matters less than you thought it would. What does happen is that you start to feel better. Gradually, incrementally, you have a little more energy. Tasks feel a little less overwhelming. You're a little more present. You laugh a little more easily. You enjoy things a little more fully. These changes might be so subtle at first that you don't even notice them. But one day you'll realize that you're not as exhausted as you were, that you actually want to do something rather than just forcing yourself through it, that you feel more like yourself, or maybe like a version of yourself you'd forgotten existed. This version of yourself, the one that emerges through rest and restoration, might be different from who you've been recently, might be quieter or louder, might want different things, might have different priorities, might need different relationships or environments or work. Allow this evolution. Don't cling to who you've been because it's familiar, even if who you've been was exhausted and depleted. Be curious about who you're becoming. Be open to what wants to emerge when you're not constantly in survival mode. You might discover that you're actually quite different from how you've been living. That the performance you've been putting on, the persona you've been projecting, isn't really you. It was just what you thought you needed to be acceptable, to be loved, to be successful, to be safe. But when you're rested enough to think clearly, connected enough to yourself to feel honestly, you might find that what you actually want is quite different from what you've been pursuing. This can be disorienting, but also liberating. It means you get to choose again. You get to align your life with who you actually are rather than who you thought you might mean disappointing people. It might mean changing your mind about commitments you've made. It might mean admitting that something isn't working even if you've invested significant time or energy in it. The sunk cost fallacy applies to life as much as to finances. Just because you've already spent time or energy on something doesn't mean you have to continue spending it. You can choose differently. You can change direction. You can prioritize your well-being over consistency or others' expectations. Making these changes often requires having difficult conversations. Telling your employer that your workload isn't sustainable. Telling your partner that the division of labor needs to change. Telling your family that you won't be able to fulfill all their expectations. Telling your friends that you need to reduce your availability. These conversations are uncomfortable. People might be upset, confused, or resistant, but your well-being is not negotiable. And people who genuinely care about you will ultimately understand and support you, even if they're initially disappointed. The key to these conversations is being clear, firm, and kind. You don't need to over-explain or justify yourself. You don't need to apologize for having needs. You don't need to make yourself small to make others comfortable. You can simply state what you need and what you're willing or not willing to do. You can acknowledge others' feelings without taking responsibility for them. You can be compassionate without being compliant. This balance is hard to find, especially if you're used to prioritizing others' feelings over your own needs. But it's essential for sustainable relationships. Some relationships won't survive this shift. Some people are only interested in the version of you that serves them. That's available whenever they need you. That prioritizes their comfort over your well-being. When you stop being that version, they leave. This is painful, but it's also clarifying. It shows you who truly values you versus who values what you can do for them. The people who remain, the relationships that deepen rather than dissolve when you start taking care of yourself, those are your people. Those are the relationships worth investing in. As you create healthier boundaries and relationships, you'll likely find that your capacity for genuine connection actually increases. When you're not depleted from maintaining relationships that drain you, you have more energy for relationships that nourish you. When you're not performing or people-pleasing, you can be authentic, which allows for deeper intimacy. When you're taking care of yourself, you can show up more fully for others rather than just going through the motions while running on empty. Paradoxically, setting boundaries often improves the quality of your relationships rather than damaging them. The same is true with work. Many people fear that if they set boundaries around their work, they'll be seen as less committed, less capable, less valuable. Sometimes this fear is justified. Some workplaces do operate on the assumption that employees should be available all the time, should work beyond their contracted hours, should sacrifice their well-being for the job. If you're in such a workplace, you have to decide whether staying is worth the cost to your health. Sometimes it is, at least temporarily, because of financial necessity or career goals. But you should make that choice consciously rather than just defaulting to it. More often, though, the fear of setting work boundaries is bigger than the reality. When you clearly communicate your limits, when you establish what you can and can't do, when you protect your time and energy, you often become more effective rather than less. You produce better quality work because you're not exhausted. You make better decisions because you're not depleted. You're more creative because you have space to think. You're more reliable because you're not constantly on the edge of burnout. And most reasonable managers and colleagues will respect boundaries that are clearly communicated and consistently maintained. If your workplace doesn't respect reasonable boundaries, if it requires unsustainable performance, if it penalizes you for taking care of yourself, you might need to consider whether it's the right place for you. Your job should not require you to sacrifice your health. No amount of money, status, or career advancement is worth chronic depletion. Life is too short, and your well-being is too important to spend it in situations that systematically harm you. This doesn't mean work should always be easy or stress-free. It means it should be sustainable. Finding sustainable work, like finding sustainable relationships, requires knowing yourself. What are your actual limits? What do you actually need to function well? What are you willing to sacrifice, and what are your non-negotiables? What kind of work environment supports your well-being versus undermines it? What schedule works for your body and your life? The better you know yourself, the better equipped you are to create or find situations that work for you rather than against you. This self-knowledge comes from paying attention to yourself, noticing what energizes you and what depletes you, tracking how different activities, interactions, and environments affect you, experimenting with different approaches and observing the results, listening to your body's signals, trusting your intuition, honoring your preferences. This might sound simple, but for many people who have spent years overriding their own needs and ignoring their own signals, it's actually quite challenging. It requires slowing down enough to notice, caring enough about yourself to pay attention, and trusting yourself enough to act on what you learn. Trust is often the hardest part. When you've been taught not to trust yourself, when you've been told that your feelings are wrong or your needs are too much or your limits are signs of weakness, learning to trust yourself is revolutionary. It means believing that what you feel is valid, that what you need matters, that what you know about yourself is true, even when others disagree. It means being your own authority rather than constantly looking outside yourself for permission or validation. This doesn't mean you never listen to others or that you're always right. It means you give your own inner knowing the same weight you give external input. It means you consult yourself first before automatically deferring to others' opinions or expectations. It means you recognize that you are the expert on your own experience, even if others are experts in their fields. A doctor might know medicine, but you know your body. A therapist might know psychology, but you know your mind. A friend might know their preferences, but you know yours. As you learn to trust yourself more, you become less dependent on external validation. You don't need everyone to approve of your choices. You don't need anyone to understand your decisions. You don't need constant reassurance that you're doing things right. You develop an internal compass that guides you. This doesn't mean you become isolated or dismissive of others. It means you become grounded in yourself, which actually makes you more capable of genuine connection because you're not constantly shape-shifting to get approval. This internal grounding is especially important when you're recovering from exhaustion because the world will keep demanding things from you. The cultural messages that led to your depletion don't disappear just because you've decided to change your relationship with them. You'll still be bombarded with messages that you should do more, be more, achieve more, that rest is laziness, that boundaries are selfish, that your worth comes from your productivity. Having a strong internal foundation helps you resist these messages rather than being swept up by them. Building this foundation takes time. It requires repeatedly choosing yourself, even when it feels uncomfortable. It requires disappointing people and surviving the discomfort of their disappointment. It requires trying new things and failing sometimes. It requires being patient with yourself when you slip back into old patterns. It requires celebrating small victories. It requires self-compassion when things don't go as planned. It requires persistence even when progress feels slow. Progress is often slow. This can be frustrating, especially in a culture that values quick fixes and immediate results. You want to feel better now. You want your life to change now. You want your relationships to improve now. But sustainable change happens gradually. It happens through small, consistent choices over time. It happens through practice and repetition. It happens through patience and persistence. The foundation you're building needs to be solid, which means it needs time to set. Some days will feel like you're not making any progress at all. Some days you'll feel as depleted as you were when you started. Some days you'll wonder if any of this is even working. These days are part of the process. They're not evidence that you're failing. They're evidence that healing isn't linear, that recovery has ups and downs, that you're human. On these days, the work is to be gentle with yourself. To remember that one hard day doesn't erase all your progress, to do what you can to care for yourself even in small ways, to trust that tomorrow might be better, and often tomorrow is better. Or if not tomorrow, then the next day or the day after that. Recovery has its own rhythm, its own timeline. Sometimes you'll feel significantly better for a stretch of days and then hit a rough patch. Sometimes you'll plateau for a while, feeling neither better nor worse. Sometimes you'll have breakthrough moments where something shifts and you realize you've moved forward in ways you didn't recognize. All of these patterns are normal. All of them are part of the journey. What matters is the overall trend. When you look back over weeks or months, are you generally doing better than you were? Are you having more good days than you used to? Are you finding it easier to set boundaries, to rest, to prioritize yourself? Are you feeling more connected to yourself and others? Are you enjoying life more? These are the markers of progress that matter, not whether every single day is perfect or whether you never have setbacks. The setbacks, when they come, are opportunities for learning. What triggered the backslide? What needs weren't being met? What old pattern got activated? What can you do differently next time? Approaching setbacks with curiosity rather than judgment turns them into useful information rather than evidence of failure. You're not failing when you slip back into old patterns. You're learning what doesn't work so you can make different choices. This learning process is lifelong. Even when you've recovered from your current exhaustion, you'll need to continue paying attention to yourself, honoring your limits, maintaining your boundaries. The skills you're developing now aren't just for getting through this difficult period. They're for sustaining yourself for the rest of your life. They're for preventing future depletion. They're for building a life that supports your well-being rather than undermines it. Part of this ongoing practice is developing better awareness of early warning signs. What happens in your body, your mood, your behavior when you're starting to get depleted? Maybe you get more irritable or withdrawn. Maybe you have trouble sleeping or you sleep too much. Maybe you lose your appetite or crave certain foods. Maybe you get headaches or stomach issues. Maybe you feel more anxious or flat. Everyone's warning signs are different. Learning yours means you can intervene earlier before you get to the point of complete exhaustion. Early intervention is much more effective than waiting until you crash. If you notice you're starting to feel depleted, you can take a rest day, say no to something optional, ask for help with something, go to bed earlier for a few nights. Small adjustments, when you're starting to tip into depletion, can prevent you from falling all the way in. But this requires you to honor those early signals rather than overriding them, which requires trusting yourself and prioritizing your well-being. It also requires planning ahead. If you know that certain times of year are more demanding, you can build in extra support and recovery time. If you know that certain activities drain you, you can limit how often you do them or ensure you have restoration time afterward. If you know that you need certain things to function well, you can prioritize making sure those things happen. This proactive approach to your well-being is very different from the reactive approach of just trying to survive until things get better on their own. Planning ahead also means creating systems and structures that support you. Maybe that's meal planning, so you have nourishing food available when you're tired. Maybe it's setting up your environment to minimize decision fatigue. Maybe it's scheduling regular rest time so it doesn't get squeezed out by other demands. Maybe it's automating or delegating tasks that drain you. Maybe it's having go-to activities for different types of rest. Whatever structures help you take care of yourself consistently, create them. Don't rely on willpower alone. Willpower is a limited resource, and when you're depleted, you have even less of it than usual. Making good choices easy and bad choices hard is much more effective than trying to override your natural inclinations through sheer force of will. If you want to rest more, make resting easy and accessible. If you want to reduce screen time, make screens less accessible. If you want to eat better, make nutritious food convenient. Design your environment and your systems to support the person you want to be rather than fighting against yourself. As you build these structures and practices, you're essentially creating a new normal. A normal where rest is built into your life rather than something you squeeze in when you have time. A normal where your needs are honored rather than constantly overridden. A normal where you have boundaries rather than being available for everything and everyone. A normal where you treat yourself with kindness rather than harsh criticism. This new normal might feel strange at first, especially compared to the constant hustle and self-sacrifice that characterized your old normal. But strange doesn't mean wrong. It just means different. Give yourself time to adjust to this different way of being. You've spent years or decades operating one way. Changing those patterns takes time. Be patient with yourself as you learn new ways of relating to yourself, to others, to work, to rest. Be patient with the people in your life as they adjust to your changes. Be patient with the process of recovery, which has its own pace that can't be rushed. Impatience won't make things move faster. It'll just make the journey harder. One aspect of this journey that's worth addressing specifically is the role of professional help. While much of recovery from exhaustion can happen through self-care and lifestyle changes, sometimes you need additional support. This might be therapy to address underlying patterns or trauma that contribute to your depletion. It might be coaching to help you develop better systems and habits. It might be medical care if your exhaustion has physical components that need treatment. It might be bodywork to help release stored tension and trauma. There's no shame in needing help. In fact, recognizing when you need help and actually seeking it is a sign of wisdom and strength. Many people resist getting help because they see it as admitting weakness or failure. But consider, if you broke your leg, you wouldn't try to heal it entirely on your own. You'd seek medical care. If your car broke down, you wouldn't insist on fixing it yourself if you lacked the knowledge and tools. You'd get a mechanic. The same logic applies to your mental and emotional well-being. Sometimes you need expertise, perspective, or support that you can't provide for yourself. That's not weakness. That's being realistic about the limits of what anyone can do alone. The right support can accelerate your healing significantly. A good therapist can help you identify and change patterns you can't see clearly on your own. A skilled bodyworker can release tension you've been holding for years. A knowledgeable doctor can address physical factors contributing to your fatigue. A supportive community can provide the connection and accountability that makes change easier. You don't have to do this alone. In fact, trying to do it entirely alone is often part of the problem. Humans are interdependent. Needing others is not weakness, it's reality. Finding the right help can take some trial and error. Not every therapist will be a good fit. Not every approach will work for you. Not every treatment will help. This can be frustrating, but it doesn't mean help isn't available. It just means you need to keep looking until you find what works. Trust your instincts about whether someone or something is helping. If you don't feel better after a reasonable period, if you feel worse, if something doesn't feel right, it's okay to try something different. As you're recovering and rebuilding, it's also important to address the stories you tell yourself. Beyond the story of being broken versus being exhausted, there are likely other narratives running in your mind that affect your well-being. Stories about what you should be able to handle. Stories about what rest means about your character. Stories about what others will think if you prioritize yourself. Stories about what will happen if you slow down. Many of these stories are based on fear rather than reality. Examining them can help you see where you're operating from outdated programming rather than current truth. What stories do you tell yourself about rest? That it's lazy, that it's only for people who have worked hard enough to earn it, that it means you're weak. Where did these stories come from? Are they actually true? Who benefits from you believing them? Often, the stories that keep us depleted serve systems and other people more than they serve us. Questioning them is an act of liberation. What stories do you tell yourself about your worth? That it comes from what you produce, that it has to be earned, that it can be lost. What would it mean to believe that your worth is inherent, that it exists simply because you exist, that nothing you do or don't do can change it? This might seem like an abstract philosophical question, but it has profound practical implications. If your worth isn't conditional, then rest doesn't threaten it. Failure doesn't diminish it. Others' opinions don't determine it. You are free to simply be. What stories do you tell yourself about needs? That having them is weakness, that expressing them is burden, that meeting them is selfish. What would change if you believed that needs are simply information, neutral facts about what you require to function well, no more shameful than a car needing fuel or a plant needing water? You wouldn't judge a car for needing gas. Why judge yourself for needing rest? These story shifts don't happen overnight. They happen through repeated practice of thinking differently, of questioning the old narratives, of experimenting with new beliefs and seeing what happens. They happen through noticing when the old stories show up and consciously choosing not to follow them. They happen through finding evidence for new stories. Each time you rest and the world doesn't end, that's evidence that rest isn't catastrophic. Each time you set a boundary and the relationship survives, that's evidence that boundaries aren't destructive. Each time you prioritize yourself and feel better as a result, that's evidence that self-care works. Gathering this evidence is important because your mind needs proof to change its beliefs. Telling yourself something different isn't enough if your experience keeps confirming the old story. You need to create new experiences that support new stories. This means taking risks, trying new approaches, doing things differently even when it feels uncomfortable. Each successful experiment strengthens the new neural pathways and weakens the old ones. And when experiments don't go as hoped, when you set a boundary and someone does get angry, when you rest and fall behind on something, when you prioritize yourself and someone is disappointed, these outcomes don't mean the new approach is wrong. They mean change is complex and messy. They mean other people have their own reactions that you can't control. They mean there are trade-offs to every choice. You have to decide which trade-offs you're willing to make. The cost of not resting, not having boundaries, not prioritizing yourself is your health and well-being. That's too high a price. As you navigate these trade-offs and changes, remember that you're not just recovering from exhaustion. You're building a different life, a life where you're not constantly in survival mode, a life where you have energy for what matters, a life where you know yourself and honor that knowledge, a life where your relationships are genuine rather than transactional, a life where your work is sustainable rather than depleting, a life where you experience joy and presence and connection. This life is possible. It requires intention and effort and time. But it's possible. It's possible to wake up feeling rested instead of already exhausted. It's possible to have energy for your day instead of just dragging through it. It's possible to enjoy activities instead of just checking them off a list. It's possible to be present with people instead of just going through the motions. It's possible to feel connected to yourself instead of alienated from your own experience. It's possible to feel hope instead of just resignation. It's possible to feel alive instead of just going through the motions of living. You might not believe this right now. If you're deep in exhaustion, these possibilities might seem impossibly far away. But they're not. They're closer than you think. They're available to you through rest and restoration and the patient building of a life that supports you. Every choice you make to honor your needs, to set a boundary to rest, to be kind to yourself, every single one of these choices moves you closer. You don't have to make massive changes all at once. You just have to keep choosing yourself, one decision at a time. And here's something important to understand. You don't have to wait until you're fully recovered to start living better. Even in the midst of exhaustion, you can have moments of joy, of connection, of meaning. Even while you're still depleted, you can experience some relief through small acts of self-care. Even before you're all the way better, you can be better than you were. Recovery isn't a destination where you'll suddenly arrive and everything will be perfect. It's a journey, and the journey itself can have moments of beauty and peace and goodness. Allow yourself to notice these moments, to savor them, to let them matter. When you have a genuinely restful sleep, appreciate it. When you enjoy a meal, really taste it. When you laugh, let yourself fully feel the joy. When you connect with someone, be present to it. These moments are precious, and they're available to you even now. You don't have to wait until everything is perfect to let good things in. Exhaustion can make you numb to pleasure and connection. Actively opening yourself to positive experiences, even small ones, helps counteract this numbness. This active opening requires some intentionality because when you're depleted, you often default to just getting through things rather than actually experiencing them. You eat without tasting. You interact without connecting. You go through beautiful places without seeing them. You hear words without really listening. You exist without really living. Bringing awareness to your experience, choosing to be present even for brief moments, starts to shift this pattern. It reminds you that life is more than just tasks and obligations. It reconnects you with the richness of actual experience. Practices like mindfulness or gratitude can support this reconnection, though you don't need to be formal about it. Simply pausing occasionally to notice where you are, what you're experiencing, what's actually happening in this moment can be enough. Simply appreciating something, anything, can help shift your focus from what's wrong to what's okay, or even what's good. This doesn't mean forcing toxic positivity or pretending everything is fine when it's not. It means acknowledging that even in difficulty, there can be moments of light. These moments of light matter more than you might think. They provide relief from the constant heaviness of exhaustion. They remind you what you're working toward. They give you evidence that better is possible. They create small deposits in your emotional bank account. They help sustain you through the harder parts of recovery. Noticing them, valuing them, letting them count, this is part of taking care of yourself. Another part of taking care of yourself is being realistic about how long recovery takes. If you've been depleted for months, it might take months to recover. If you've been depleted for years, it might take years. This isn't to discourage you. It's to help you have appropriate expectations. You won't fix everything in a week or even a month. Sustainable change takes time. Deep healing takes time. Building new patterns takes time. Being patient with this process is essential. Impatience often leads to giving up. You try something new for a short time, don't see dramatic results, and conclude it doesn't work. But meaningful change usually happens gradually. The improvements are subtle at first. You have slightly more energy. You feel slightly less overwhelmed. You're slightly more present. These small shifts are easy to miss if you're looking for dramatic transformation. But they're real and they're important. They're the foundation that larger changes build on. Tracking your progress can help you notice these subtle shifts. This might be as simple as a daily or weekly check-in with yourself about how you're feeling. It might be noting small victories in a journal. It might be using a scale to rate different aspects of your well-being. However you do it, having some way to look back and see that you're actually making progress, even slow progress, can help you stay motivated and committed. The commitment is important because there will be times when you want to give up, times when it feels too hard, too slow, too uncertain. Times when slipping back into old patterns seems easier than continuing to change. In these moments, remember why you started. Remember what it costs you to stay depleted. Remember what becomes possible through recovery. Remember that you deserve to feel better, to live better, to be better, and then make the next small choice that honors your well-being. These small choices accumulate over time into significant transformation. The decision to rest tonight builds your capacity to rest regularly. The boundary you set today makes the next boundary easier. The kindness you show yourself in this moment strengthens your ability to be self-compassionate consistently. Each choice matters not just in itself, but in the pattern it contributes to. You're not just changing individual behaviors. You're changing your relationship with yourself at a fundamental level. This fundamental change is what makes recovery sustainable. Surface-level changes might help temporarily, but if you don't address the underlying patterns and beliefs that led to your depletion, you'll eventually end up depleted again. The real work is changing how you see yourself, how you treat yourself, what you believe you deserve, what you believe is required of you. When these fundamental things shift, the behavioral changes become natural rather than forced. So yes, practice the behaviors. Rest more, set boundaries, say no, prioritize yourself, eat well, move gently, connect meaningfully, process emotions, reduce stimulation. All of these practical actions matter, but also do the deeper work of examining and changing your beliefs. Question the stories that tell you rest is lazy, that needs are weakness, that your worth is conditional, that you have to earn the right to take up space. Replace these stories with truths that actually serve you. The truth is that you are a human being with inherent worth and actual needs. The truth is that rest is essential for all living things, including you. The truth is that boundaries protect your well-being and make sustainable relationships possible. The truth is that taking care of yourself enables you to show up better for everything and everyone that matters to you. The truth is that you don't have to earn your right to exist, to have needs, to take up space, to matter. These rights are inherent to your humanity. Living from these truths, instead of from the lies you've been told, changes everything. It changes how you move through the world. It changes what you're willing to tolerate and what you refuse to accept. It changes how you spend your time and energy. It changes who you spend that time and energy with. It changes what you pursue and what you let go of. It changes how you talk to yourself and how you allow others to talk to you. It changes what you see as possible for your life. And all of this change starts with recognizing that you're not broken, that your struggle isn't evidence of fundamental deficiency, that your exhaustion is a response to impossible demands and insufficient support, not a character flaw. This recognition opens up the possibility of healing because you can heal from exhaustion. You can rest, restore, rebuild. You can develop different patterns. You can create a different life. You can't fix brokenness, but you can absolutely recover from depletion. This recovery is your birthright. You don't have to earn it or deserve it or qualify for it. You need it because you're human, and humans need rest and care and compassion. You're entitled to it simply because you exist. No one can grant it to you or take it away from you. It's yours to claim, yours to prioritize, yours to protect. And claiming it is one of the most radical and important things you can do, both for yourself and for everyone who benefits from you being healthy and whole rather than depleted and broken. So claim it, choose it, commit to it, not perfectly because perfection isn't possible or necessary, but consistently as best you can, one choice at a time. Choose rest over pushing through. Choose boundaries over people-pleasing. Choose self-compassion over self-criticism. Choose authenticity over performance. Choose sustainable over impressive. Choose yourself. Not selfishly, but necessarily. Not at the expense of others, but in service of everyone, because the world needs you whole more than it needs you depleted. The journey from exhaustion to restoration is challenging. It requires courage to change patterns that feel safe, even though they're harmful. It requires strength to disappoint people who are used to you sacrificing yourself. It requires wisdom to distinguish between genuine limitations and fear-based avoidance. It requires patience to allow healing to unfold at its own pace. It requires faith that recovery is possible even when you can't yet see it. All of this is hard, but you can do hard things. You've been doing hard things all along, surviving on empty, pushing through pain, carrying weights that weren't yours to carry. You're already strong. Now you get to channel that strength toward healing instead of toward depletion. And you don't have to do it perfectly. You'll have setbacks. You'll make mistakes. You'll sometimes choose the old pattern instead of the new one. That's okay. That's human. That's part of learning. Be gentle with yourself through all of it. Treat yourself the way you treat someone you love who's going through something difficult, with patience, with encouragement, with compassion, with realistic expectations, with celebration of small victories, with comfort during setbacks, with unwavering commitment to their well-being even when they stumble. You are worthy of that treatment from yourself. You are worthy of your own kindness, your own patience, your own compassion. You are worthy of rest, of care, of a life that supports you rather than depletes you. You are worthy of recovery. You are worthy of healing. You are worthy of feeling better, of living better, of being better, not because of anything you've done or achieved or proven, simply because you are, because you exist, because you matter, because your well-being matters, because you're not broken, just exhausted, and exhaustion can be healed. So begin right now, in this very moment, to treat yourself differently. Take a deep breath. Really breathe all the way in and all the way out. Notice how you're holding your body. Are your shoulders tense, your jaw clenched, your stomach tight? Can you soften just a little? Can you let yourself settle just a bit? This isn't about fixing everything in one breath. It's about taking one moment to be kind to your body, to acknowledge that you're here, that you're trying, that you're doing your best, and your best is enough. Even when it doesn't feel like enough, even when you can't do what you used to be able to do, even when you're falling short of your own expectations, your best is enough. You're showing up. You're trying to take care of yourself. You're reading these words, which means some part of you is reaching for healing, for hope, for a different way. That matters. That counts. That's enough for right now. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to know exactly how to heal or exactly what to do. You just have to keep showing up for yourself, keep trying, keep choosing care over depletion when you can. The path will reveal itself as you walk it. The answers will come as you need them. The healing will happen as you create space for it. Trust the process, even when you can't see the destination. Trust that your body wants to heal, that your system is designed for resilience, that you have within you everything you need to recover. What you might not have within you is everything you need to recover alone, and that's okay. That's why we need each other, why we need community, connection, support. You're not meant to do this by yourself. Humans are social creatures. We heal in relationship, in connection, in the experience of being seen and accepted and supported. So reach out, ask for help. Let people in, allow yourself to be supported. This isn't weakness, this is wisdom. The people who truly care about you want to support you. They want you to be well. They want to help if they can. Letting them help is actually a gift to them as well as to you. It allows them to express their care in concrete ways. It deepens the relationship through mutual vulnerability and support. It reminds both of you that you're not alone. So when someone offers help, consider saying yes. When you need support, consider asking for it. When you're struggling, consider being honest about it instead of pretending you're fine. This honesty, this vulnerability, this willingness to be imperfect and needy and human, it's terrifying for many people. We've been taught to have it all together, to never let them see you sweat, to be strong and capable at all times. But this performance is exhausting. It isolates you. It prevents genuine connection. And it denies others the opportunity to show up for you the way you show up for them. True relationships involve mutual give and take. You can't always be the giver. Sometimes you need to receive. And that's not just okay, it's essential. Receiving gracefully is a skill that many depleted people need to develop. We're so used to giving that we don't know how to receive. When someone compliments us, we deflect. When someone offers help, we refuse. When someone wants to support us, we insist we're fine. This pattern keeps us isolated and depleted. Learning to receive means learning to say yes to offers of help, to accept compliments with a simple thank you, to let people care for you without immediately reciprocating. It means allowing yourself to be on the receiving end sometimes. This might feel vulnerable or uncomfortable at first. You might feel guilty or indebted. You might worry about being a burden. But consider, when you help someone you care about, do you see them as a burden? Do you feel resentful, or do you feel glad you could support them? Most people feel the latter. They're happy to help people they care about. They want to be there for them. Assume that people who offer you help feel the same way. Trust their offer. Honor their desire to support you by accepting it. As you practice receiving, as you build genuine reciprocal relationships, as you create a support network that actually supports you, you'll find that life becomes more manageable. The burden doesn't feel as heavy when you're not carrying it alone. The challenges don't feel as overwhelming when you have people to face them with. The exhaustion doesn't feel as endless when you have places to rest and people who understand. You're still responsible for your own well-being, but you don't have to maintain it in complete isolation. This support network might include friends, family, therapists, coaches, support groups, online communities, spiritual communities, or any combination of these. What matters is that you have people you can be real with, who accept you as you are, who support your healing rather than your depletion. If your current relationships don't provide this, you might need to invest in building new connections. This takes time and energy, which can feel impossible when you're already depleted. But even small steps matter. One conversation, one meeting, one connection at a time. And as you build these supportive relationships, you'll want to maintain boundaries within them too. Just because someone is supportive doesn't mean they get unlimited access to your time and energy. Just because you're being more vulnerable doesn't mean you have to share everything with everyone. Just because you're receiving support doesn't mean you can't also have limits about how and when that support is offered. Healthy relationships include healthy boundaries. They honor both people's needs and limits. They involve communication, negotiation, and mutual respect. Setting boundaries in relationships you care about can be especially challenging. You might worry that boundaries will damage the relationship or push the person away. But actually, boundaries often strengthen relationships by making them more sustainable. When both people feel respected and considered, when neither feels taken advantage of or depleted, the relationship can thrive. Boundaries aren't walls that keep people out. They're guidelines that allow people to be in relationship sustainably. As you develop these skills, setting boundaries, receiving support, being vulnerable, communicating honestly, you're essentially learning how to be in relationship in a healthier way. This impacts every relationship in your life, not just your close ones. It affects how you interact with coworkers, with service providers, with strangers. When you know your worth, when you honor your needs, when you communicate clearly, all of your interactions shift. You stop tolerating disrespect. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop people-pleasing. You become more grounded, more authentic, more self-possessed. This groundedness is attractive. It draws people to you who appreciate authenticity. It repels people who prefer you compliant and accommodating. This shift in who you attract and repel is valuable. It naturally improves the quality of your relationships and interactions. You end up surrounded more by people who value you for who you are rather than what you can do for them. These are the relationships worth having. These are the people worth investing in. And as your relationships improve, as you feel more supported and less isolated, your capacity for rest and restoration increases. You're not carrying everything alone. You're not managing everyone's needs and feelings. You're not performing or pretending. You can actually relax. You can actually be yourself. You can actually receive care and support. This makes an enormous difference in your energy levels and overall well-being. But remember, even with support, you're still responsible for your own care. No one else can make you rest. No one else can set your boundaries for you. No one else can prioritize your well-being. These are things only you can do. Other people can support you, encourage you, help you. But the fundamental choice to take care of yourself is yours alone. This is empowering rather than burdensome because it means your well-being is not dependent on anyone else changing. You have agency. You have choice. You can create change in your life regardless of what anyone else does. Exercising this agency might mean making hard choices, leaving a job that's destroying your health, ending a relationship that's consistently depleting, moving to a different environment, changing your entire lifestyle. These big changes are scary. They involve uncertainty and risk. But sometimes they're necessary. Sometimes the situation you're in is so fundamentally unsustainable that no amount of self-care or boundary setting will make it okay. Sometimes you need to make a bigger change. If you're facing such a decision, take time to think it through carefully. Consider your options, gather information, talk to trusted people, but also listen to yourself. What does your body tell you? What does your intuition say? What do you know deep down, even if you're scared to admit it? Often we know what we need to do long before we're ready to do it. Honoring that knowing, even when it's terrifying, is an act of profound self-respect. And if you do make a big change, be patient with yourself through the transition. Change, even positive change, is stressful. You might feel disoriented or doubt yourself. You might grieve what you left behind, even if you know it was right to leave. You might feel afraid about the uncertainty ahead. All of these feelings are normal. Let yourself feel them without judging them. Comfort yourself through the transition. Remind yourself why you made the choice you made. Trust that you can handle what comes next. You are more capable than you give yourself credit for. You've survived everything that's happened to you so far. You've made it through difficult times before. You've adapted to change. You've figured things out. You've persisted even when it was hard. These aren't small things. These demonstrate real strength, real resilience, real capability. When you doubt yourself, remember what you've already survived. Remember what you've already overcome. Remember that you're still here, still trying, still reaching for better. That takes courage and strength. As you move forward in your recovery, in your life, in your choices, hold on to this. You are not broken. You are exhausted. And being exhausted is not a permanent state. It's a condition that can change with rest, care, and time. It's a signal that something needs to be different, not a verdict on your worth or capability. It's information, not identity. You are so much more than your current state of depletion. You are a complex, capable, worthy human being who is going through a hard time and responding to impossible demands the best way you know how. There is nothing wrong with you. There is something wrong with a world that demands more than humans can sustainably give. There is something wrong with systems that extract maximum productivity while providing minimum support. There is something wrong with cultures that glorify busyness and demonize rest. There is something wrong with beliefs that tie worth to productivity, but there is nothing wrong with you. You're not failing, you're not weak, you're not less than, you're human, and humans have limits, and needs, and requirements for well-being, and all of that is completely, entirely, totally okay. So release the story of brokenness. Let it go. It doesn't serve you, it doesn't help you, it doesn't lead anywhere good. Replace it with the truth. You are exhausted, and exhaustion can be healed. You need rest, and rest is available to you when you choose it. You deserve care, and you can provide that care to yourself and receive it from others. You are worthy, not because of what you do, but because of who you are, and who you are is enough. Who you are has always been enough. Who you are will always be enough. Take this message into your heart. Let it settle into your bones. Believe it even if you can't feel it yet. You are not broken, you are exhausted, and there is healing ahead. There is rest ahead. There is a life ahead where you feel better, where you have energy, where you're not just surviving but actually living, where you wake up with hope instead of dread, where you have capacity for joy, where you feel connected to yourself and others, where you know your worth and honor your needs, where you take up space without apology, where you rest without guilt, where you live authentically rather than performing, where you thrive instead of merely existing. This life is possible. It's available. It's waiting for you to claim it through the patient, persistent work of choosing yourself, of resting, of healing. It won't be perfect. There will still be challenges and struggles and hard days. But it will be so much better than depleting yourself into the ground. It will be sustainable in a way your current pattern isn't. It will actually nourish you instead of draining you. It will be worth the effort it takes to build it. So start building. Start now. Start small. Start with one choice to honor yourself, one moment of rest, one boundary set, one need expressed, one kindness shown to yourself. Start and then keep going. Keep choosing, keep building, keep healing. Day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment, you're creating a different future. You're reclaiming your life. You're recovering yourself. Not the depleted, exhausted version who's just trying to survive, but the whole, rested version who actually gets to live. You deserve to live. Not just exist, not just get through, not just survive. Live, fully, authentically, joyfully, present to your experience rather than numb to it. Connected to yourself and others rather than isolated and performing. Taking up space rather than making yourself small. Honoring your needs rather than overriding them. Resting when you need to rather than pushing through. Asking for help rather than suffering alone. Being human rather than trying to be superhuman. This is what recovery offers. Not just the absence of exhaustion, but the presence of genuine well-being. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just getting through days, but actually enjoying them. Not just enduring life, but engaging with it. This is available to you. Claim it, choose it, create it. One choice at a time, one day at a time, one breath at a time. You can do this. You are doing this. You are already on the path just by being here, by reading this, by considering that maybe, just maybe, you're not broken after all. Maybe you're just tired. Maybe you just need rest. Maybe there's hope. Maybe healing is possible. Maybe you deserve better. Maybe things can change. Maybe you can change them. Maybe you're already changing. Maybe it's already beginning. And maybe, just maybe, you're going to be okay. Better than okay. Well, whole, restored, yourself again, or perhaps yourself for the first time in a long time. That version of you who isn't depleted, who has energy and joy and presence and peace, that version is still there, still possible, still waiting, still you. You are not broken, you are exhausted. And exhaustion can be healed, so rest, restore, recover, reclaim yourself and your life. You deserve it, you need it, and it's yours for the choosing. Choose it, choose yourself, choose healing. Choose rest, choose life, choose now, and then choose again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. Keep choosing until it becomes natural, until it becomes who you are, until you've built a life that supports you rather than depletes you. Until you're not just surviving anymore, but actually, genuinely, deeply living. That's what's possible. That's what awaits. That's what you're moving toward with every choice to honor yourself, to rest, to heal. So keep going. You're not broken. You're just tired. And tired can rest. And rested can heal. And healed can thrive. That's your path forward. That's your hope. That's your truth. You're not broken. You're exhausted. And everything, absolutely everything, changes when you understand that difference.